Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. This week on Monday we celebrated 61 years. Were we celebrating, commemorating, or just marking another independence? With 61 years behind us, what does that mean for us? We put a litmus test to our exam here in Uganda to ask ourselves, what are we doing economically, what are we doing socially, politically, and the governance? With 9 presidents in this country and a GDP that has come from 1.3 billion to now 48 billion, how far have we come as a country? We stop, reflect what achievements we have made and what challenges we have ahead. But also, we look at the president's speech that he gave, where he gave 8 essentials to get us to success. Is the success for this 61st year? That's the biggest question, even as we put this independence to a litmus test. Let me get to our panel tonight. This team are experienced in different areas, and I'll start on my extreme left there. Captain Francis Babu, a senior citizen of this country, has been in an array of leadership portfolios there, but today he's just a senior citizen and a captain of flight there. We get to our next panelist. She has been away for a while, but she comes back today to be able to put some hairs or split hairs tonight. Dr. Sarah Birete, the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance there, and she's here with us to be able to put some analysis to some of these things there. Next to her is Dr. Tanga Odoi, the chairman of the Electoral Commission of the National Resistance Movement. He's an academic, but today he's coming here to speak as an authority on what NRM has done. Finally, Professor Sarah Sali, who is a dean at the School of Women and Gender Studies there. She's a researcher, a sociologist, and today we'll be understanding exactly what an ordinary Ugandan wants to understand, especially with what Uganda wants to achieve as we go forward. Let's get this clip, and when we're back, we'll be diving into our conversation this evening.
In the late 50s and 60s, a powerful wind of political change swept across the African continent as nations fervently pursued self-rule and independence. The promise to conquer ignorance, diseases, and poverty resonated deeply with the masses. Now, 61 years later, Uganda looks back, celebrating its triumphs and honestly assessing the road ahead. Join Timothy Nyangweso and a team of distinguished experts as they unravel Uganda's journey through the decades on your cherished weekly TV show, Behind the Headlines. Be part of the conversation on Wednesday, October 11th at 10 p.m. exclusively on UBC. Inspiring Uganda. In the late 50s and 60s, a powerful wind of political change swept across the...
So that is our discussion tonight, and the panel is ready to answer those questions there, but you can be part of the conversation. 0709 60 25 92. That's our WhatsApp and text number there. Let us know what you think about the conversation about independence there. But we also want to put this there. Israel and the Gaza, where the war is ravaging since Sunday. About 1,000 plus people have lost their lives. We need peace in that area there. So we are standing with both countries there to find a solution that is amicable to both. Let me get to my panel here. Ladies and gentlemen, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for coming. It's an honor to have you, Dr. Tang. It's an honor to have you, Dr. Sarah, and Captain Francis Babu, as always. It's a pleasure. Professor Sarah Sali, thank you always for being here. Let's start off this conversation with a thought that I had this morning. It's 61 years, Professor Sarah. What does that mean when you think about it? How do you comprehend 61 years of this country called Uganda?
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers. Yeah, 61 years, we've come a very long way, and a lot has really changed. First of all, you had the aspirations of the forefathers of independence, in that they looked forward to issues of socio-economic transformation. They looked at social development. They looked at self-determination. They looked at economic development. So they really wanted a Uganda where people decided their fate as Ugandans. And today, a lot of that has been achieved amidst a number of challenges. And some of those challenges have been local, but a lot of the challenges have also been foreign inspired, in that over the 61 years, we have been inserted deeper and deeper into the global economy. and into the global way of doing things. So we are no longer just planning for Uganda as Ugandans, but as we plan for Uganda, we remember that we are part of a bigger ecosystem. So 61 years after independence has seen a lot of growth in terms of infrastructure. There's been a lot of growth in terms of, you talked about the kind of the economy we had. We are now into a much bigger economy if you measure it in terms of gross national income. But also the population has increased. So it was not like it was before. So there's been a lot of growth in terms of economic growth. Of course, the issue of economic development as per the issues of the people and level of satisfaction will always differ and will always be debatable, because at the end of the day, when I say we have been inserted into the global economy, the Ugandans in Uganda today are not just planning according to what the aspirations of the country were. Their feelings of satisfaction or dissatisfaction are very much influenced by, one, the basics on the ground, but also, two, by what they are seeing elsewhere. So that's why I'm saying that in terms of economic growth, you will see there are more buildings that have come up, you'll see there are more schools that have come up, you'll see more people achieving this, more money in the economy. But in terms of whether people are satisfied or dissatisfied or stressed will be mediated by what they see happening elsewhere. But also there are certain things you cannot rule out that have happened as we have globalized. The issues of neoliberalism. So you'll have the initial 60 years, the initial years of independence that were really like glorious, and you see a lot of development and governments committing to grow these places. And then you see the 90s when structural adjustment comes in, and the government, which was just coming out of war and trying to rebuild, being slapped with so many conditionalities of what they can do and what they can't do and how the state must roll out. So that in a way even disrupted what the aspirations of that war had been, what the aspirations of the people had been. So today, of course, you have this thing, this balance between what the people are doing vis-a-vis what the government is doing and what the government should have done more, but also the thinking of the economy around that thing has changed. Now, for the people on the ground, it's just, we had this, we no longer have this, other people across the border have this, but generally, it is very difficult to manage today with a fast-growing population, with the kind of economic regime we have been saddled with the debt, and these are very much the foreign things that I'm talking about. So it's not just enough for you to feel Ugandan and do your thing in a small microcosm. Everything has to be mediated by what is happening elsewhere. So 60 years to a local person on the ground is, do we have hospitals? Do we have access to health care? And in terms of the volume of providing those things, there has actually been a growth. But because we've also had a very big population growing, so that looks like there's not much. But beyond the basics and household level, we've seen more integration in terms of the East African community. We are seeing more of course the airline has been revived and we are grateful for that, but we're also seeing more integration, like now we are launching a flight to Mumbai, we are going to launch a flight to Lagos. And as we do these kinds of things, so you see the Pan-African dream, these are opportunities for the Pan-African regime. We're also living in the era where the African Union is questioning whether we should just be always looking towards externally from the continent, vis-a-vis actually more collaboration. So you've had more things like AFTCA and all those kinds of things. So there's a lot that is happening. So the 61 years have been years of dynamism, but they're also very great years of hope, because a lot is happening in a short time and people can witness these gains within their lifetime. So there's been a lot, good and bad, but I think the good has superseded over the years.
Thank you very much, Professor. Dr. Tanga, looking at the 61 years, 24 of 8 presidents, 37 of President Museveni there, when you put a measure of these 61 years, what is your reflection of it?
First of all, thank you very much for hosting me. It's quite a while. And thanks colleagues with whom I'm to debate, especially my very good friend and academic political nemesis to the left. Of course, Sarah, the two Sarahs, the professor and me have been in the university for a long time. And our elder captain, Honorable Captain Francis Babu, is actually not only a person who's going to talk from the angle of history, but is going to use what we call history as current affairs, because he was a player in some of what we are going to talk about. The historical trajectory of Uganda is a piece of work worth very good study. Born in 1962 as an independent country, a country where the people who received independence were full of hope, excitement, to the extent that if you see the lowering of the Union Jack, you feel the population was so enthusiastic about their independence. Unfortunately, that independence was shattered within a space of 4 to 5 years. That joy, that excitement was then enjoyed between 1962 to 1964. The moment the Army Mutiny of 1964 took place, the historical landscape changed, and Uganda began to compete with countries which can be defined later as failed states. 1962, 1964, a land of plenty. Uganda was at takeoff, even better than the other two East African countries. 1964, the Army Mutiny takes place in the whole East Africa. Tanzania handles it very well. Kenya handles it very well by restricting the army back to the barracks. Uganda handles it recklessly by allowing the army into politics. The army out of the barracks into politics, unprepared involvement in the politics. From 1964 to 1966, we have a conversation, unpleasant conversation, out of two political dimensions which had entered an unholy alliance. The Republicans of a sort into the monarchists, culminating into the 1966 crisis, destroying Uganda, or Buganda, which had been used by the British as the epicenter of their colonialism and the epicenter of their thinking that would be an example of how development should spread to the other parts of Uganda. That historical trajectory continues not only with political malaise, but constitutional demise, with the rise of new constitutions, up to when we have what we call the pigeonhole constitution, which was actually to use the constitutional war against Buganda, but that set a precedent for what Uganda became in the next 10 years. 1971, we get the coup, the army in full charge, and what happens is actually not my mention, but everyone's knowledge. The destruction started to the extent that the British, who had given independence to Uganda, again maybe thought they should regroup and take over because they had been sponsors of some of the confusion. Did we get independence prematurely? Did we get or give independence, or were we given independence and the leaders were old or young? Irrespective, I think the leaders at independence did not really weigh the magnitude of work because of lack of ideological scope. So Uganda at independence in 1962 takes a journey up to 1971, takes a wrong journey up to 1979. There we have a first liberation. You are liberated from the British. You are liberated in 1971 by claimants of Amin. We are now liberating Uganda from this and the other. But again, we are going to another liberation in 1979. So how many liberations? Are these all independence? We are independent. Another group comes and says we are now independent. So the historical trajectory of Uganda continues so up to 1986. The rise of NRM. Yes, the NRM now has been here for the years it has been. How many years you said? 37. And one would say, like Sarah will, I'm sure, on my left say, that the 37 years is quite enough to have transformed this country. But people do not put in perspective the destruction the country had undergone socially, politically, and economically. So that you are rebuilding. You move 3 steps forward, but you have to build 5 steps backwards.
Exactly.
That is Uganda. We come with experiments. World Bank comes in, IMF comes in, experiments here and there. Up to when we seem now to have gotten our foot on the pedal and we are moving. I want to declare my interest that I'm NRM. I want to declare that one for viewers who don't know that I am. To the extent that I'll be very objective and critique the NRM as an academic. To say here we failed, but I think the percentage failure compared to the success, we are moving very well.
Thank you very much.
For now, I want to stop there, but I'm sure
You'll return.
the people to my left, we have the current affairs man who will give us more. And of course the critic, not to mention, because I know Sarah, we've been here together. And this is not to intimidate you not to talk.
Why are
Say
you
it.
submitting for
Thank you very much.
Dr. Sarah, let me come to you. Dr. Tang has given us history and told us all those years. But when we look at still the trajectory of 61 years, let me bring it closer to something that is closer to your heart. 28 years of this constitution. What do you make of it and the independence of this country?
Well, to begin with, a journey of 61 years, if it was a person working, especially public service, they would be retiring, because our retirement age is 60. So they will have offered their best years, and they will be winding up. So if you look at our independence in that line, I know that nation building is really a longer process compared to the life of a person. But at least we should have been at takeoff stage. I know that Dr. Tangodoi tried to intimidate me, looking at where I'll come from, and maybe rightly so, because I think that as we reflect, we owe it to the citizens, being on a national broadcaster, to try to bring out all the angles and aspects of a journey we have walked as a country. You stated in your opening remarks that we've had 61 years, 24 occupied by 8 presidents, 37 occupied by 1 president. I know that they are the presidents we forget the trial presidency of Oscar Msoke after Paul Mwanga, of Oscar Msoke, of Hunter Wacha, and Porekap, Nyamchoncho. We forget that presidency, but why I'm pointing it out, it's the only presidency that has peacefully handed over power in this country. They took over power in May 1980 and handed over in December 1980. And it's a history we usually forget because we are used to the other 8 that have only transited through the barrel of the gun. And as I comment on our journey as a constitution, I will start precisely on that very point. That the framers of the Constitution, the 1995 Constitution, which is our 4th Constitution as a country, drawing from the Odochi Commission report, the citizens unanimously wanted a framework for peaceful handover of power. All sub-counties of Uganda, the people said they are tired of presidents running through by the barrel of the gun to exile. So when we spend 61 years as a country and we have been denied this opportunity in terms of our democracy, that no president has peacefully taken power and peacefully handed it over to another. It's problematic. And nobody should be comfortable with this status quo. Some people might say the 37 years is evidence of stability, but how do you test stability? Stability is tested. We would have said Uganda is stable if we are able to test this peaceful way of coming to power and peaceful way of exiting power. Unless we test that as a country, even the 37 years are not evidence of stability. You look at the 28 years of our constitutionalism under the 1995 Constitution, which has undergone 3 major amendments. The first amendment was for return of parties through a referendum. The second major amendment was removal of term limits in 2005. And the third major amendment was for removal of age limit in 2017. What does that say about us as a country? The removal of age limit in 2017 was marked in a manner that saw the temple of democracy come under attack by the military. We saw a repeat of sins, like when Dr. Milton Obote commanded the military, the army, to surround Parliament during the Pigeonhole Constitution in 1966-67. This time the army did not stop outside. It entered the chambers and violated the temple of democracy in an effort to remove age limit and keep one man in power. So the Constitution has been violated. The removal of term limits in 2005 brought in for the first time a situation for Ugandans to hear that legislators can be bribed under the famous or infamous 5 million bribe for removal of term limits. It was unheard of. And since then it has become a culture, to the extent that for even after the passing of a budget, then MPs were given 40 million as a reward for passing a budget. So it has now become a culture that our legislators must be bribed to do the work they must do, thanks to the bribe for removal of term limits. So what stability are we talking about? We can look at the other 2 elements that bring in the spirit of the Constitution. One is that has been since mutated. The second spirit of the Constitution is on free and fair elections and is embedded under Article 1 of the Constitution, which anchors in the sovereignty of the people, the power of the people to choose their leaders regularly in free and fair, credible elections. Another historical, I don't know, the historical taint that we have in this country is the inability to hold free and fair, credible elections. The 3 times elections have been challenged in the Supreme Court. The court is on record to have held that there are irregularities and the elections do not conform to the standard envisaged in our Constitution. There are times when there have been no petitions. The recent elections degenerated into kidnaps, torture, and we still have missing persons in this country. So that is the second spirit of the Constitution. The third spirit of the Constitution is through the doctrine of separation of powers. We have a parliament that is largely a rubber stamp. We have contested, this doctrine is contested in its framework. Whereas the arms of government are supposed to work in an interdependent but supportive manner, we have an overbearing executive in this country that overshadows the other institutions of governance. And that also creates a dent in our constitutionalism. And as I conclude, the fourth spirit of the Constitution is on the fundamental rights and freedoms of the people. Even as we celebrated the 61 years of independence, the opposition was under siege by the military and police. They had no chance to even hold a press conference at their party offices. So all is not well.
Thank you, Dr. Sarr. Captain Francis Bagum, something Dr. Tang said, was it premature for us to be able to get this independence? When you look at our independence as a country, are we a state? Are we a nation? What are we?
Thank you very much, and good evening. I'd like to start off with the International Day for the Girl Child.
Yes.
I think it's a very important day. There has been a change for women and the girl, and therefore we must celebrate it. I've got a daughter, and daughters, by the way, and therefore I think it's very important. It's also the International Day for the Mental Health. Now, these are very important days for us to look at. Meanwhile, I like us to look at, I've been hearing a lot of people, I like to say this. In Tanzania, they've started a new thing. When the president stands up to speak, or any leader now, they say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Yesu asifiwe. You know, the two religions, Christianity and Muslim, are brought together. And since we are on national media, I think our people should be brought together. And when we debate, we should tell them that they should not be worried. This country is moving, and no matter whatever happens, whatever these little things are happening, they are bound to get finished eventually. So I want our people to be steady. They should not be worried. I have hope. So I think I should start from that point of view. There is a lot of people who say founding fathers, the founding fathers of Uganda were British in Berlin in 1894. They put the countries, they put people together and they called it Uganda. Those are the founding fathers. You should never tell us that there are other founding fathers. They put nationalities together, came here. There's a man called Lugard, Captain Lugard. He started in Kenya and came here telling people to sign a treaties. And eventually the governors that came after him signed treaties with different leaders of this country. They never respected our culture. They never respected our leaders. They did whatever they felt like. They signed agreements, and they did not even look at what our people were like, what they were doing. They were not interested. They made us grow crops. They made us do things that they wanted. 70 years later, they said, look, there's a wind of change in Africa, we are leaving. There was nothing to fall back on with their modern system, which everybody keeps on singing. Today it's called democracy. It's the new tune. And we are supposed to immediately understand what it's all about. While theirs evolved from their culture, ours, they want us to evolve it from them. And they should tell us what we should do. So here we are. Did we get independence? What independence here meant is that after 70 years of telling us what to do, they say, look, you have a few leaders here. Here's your management. We are stopping to manage your country. You manage it now. The word there were management. We were changing management from the colonial rule to a management of selected few. I don't want to go into the background of that group that were given the power from 1950 onwards, because they also have their own problems. Between 1950 and 1962, they were already divided. And the British had a method of rule called divide and rule. So by the time we were getting independence, already people were divided, even in those parties. Within a year, the people who were supposed to be in a multi-party dispensation had all crossed the floor, and we had a one-party state. That's where we started. Our problem started in the 1960s. Did not start today. I don't know why people keep on saying, this is the same thing we've been carrying on forward. Brothers hating a brother. One day the brother goes and fights the other one. Tomorrow they call it liberation. The other one fights, puts one down, that's another liberation. Another one puts another one down, that's another liberation. So we are having liberation one after the other. And somebody's out there winding us like little dolls. We therefore, all these land people tell us it's called neo-colonialism. Basically what it is that, yes, we had to get, these people had to go. They came here, virtually destroyed our institutions, and did not allow them to grow. Do you know, they put our leaders on a payroll. Each of them were getting a salary. So here we are, they say you're getting independence. President Nyerere put it very nicely when he came to the conference center here after retiring. He said, when we got independence in Tanzania, in Tanganyika, we only had 8 graduates. 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many did we have? Who were they? The eldest person there was Obote and Sir Edward Mutesa, who were over 30. The rest were below 30. And you keep telling us we're against young people. They started this country off. So from that point on, it's not that we should not have got independence or we got it the wrong time. The people who were given the mantles of leadership underestimated the forces, the conflict of leadership. And they started breaking down a year after, when the opposition, which was supposed to be opposing the government, crossed the floor. When the coalition group started disintegrating. So here you are, you have 3 parties, each one going their own way. The leader of the opposition becomes a minister of internal affairs but he talked about 1964, the mutiny of the King African Rifles, the vestiges of King African Rifles, the 4th King African Rifles. He forgets 4 ministers were put in prison. They were Ibingira, Ngobi, Lumu, and one other person who has escaped my mind. That's where the problem started. They did not start. In fact, when you keep on talking about today, I sometimes wonder why you don't want to know where these things have come from. So in 1966, they go to Rubiri here, destroys the Rubiri, kills people. First and foremost, why did you make a king a president? Why? How can you make a king a president in a republic? You have a republic, you have this. Your 1962 constitution, which you say has had 4 models. You had full federal, semi-federal, and unitary in one constitution. That was a time bomb. So Lancaster House, that's where they went and they did that. We now come to Uganda. These things start exploding. You have something called lost counties. I don't know they lost to who. Lost counties, you know, I was young, I was very young, but I saw dead bodies from Nankurabi up to Namungona. They were dead. People were fighting. In 1966, where I was at Makerere School, I saw Rubiri on fire. The next day, Uganda Argus showed us a heap of dead bodies. So when you talk about the journey, tell the people the truth about the journey. Let us not look at what I would call them, small little things that have happened now. Let's look at the journey, what has happened. 1966, 67, we're supposed to have had the first election. It never took place. We had a Republican constitution. 1971, we're supposed to have another election. A government was overthrown when people were in Singapore. So that's the journey I'm talking about now, the political journey. The economy, luckily, was so strong that up to that time, it was still moving.
Yeah. Correct.
And the leaders who were in the civil service were perfectly good until the man overthrew the government and started making the permanent secretaries ministers. You're with me now. Now let's go from 1970 to 1979. All right? Some people call it the economic war era. There was no economic war. It was a very unfortunate situation. And for some reason, our coffee fetched the highest price in the world at that time.
Yeah.
And we got so much money out of it. So we bought embassies, we bought aeroplanes, and we did all sorts of things. So people now call that economic boom. Who benefited out of that economic boom? The National Bank of Kenya, which traded most of our coffee. The richest people bought hotels in Kenya. So when you talk about this country, some of us have got pain, and it's not now. The symptoms you are seeing now are the results of these things I'm talking about coming up. So what happens after 8 years, 9 years? We have the war. The Tanzanians, our people liberate this country, brother against brother again. Nobody could sit down and find a solution. So here we have a situation. People play Monopoly from Moshi. They play Monopoly, they play all sorts of games on the table. We end up with all sorts of things here. For about 2 years, games up and down. Presidents coming in for 3 months, others coming in for 1 year. I mean, it became basically a game of chess. So here, we now start a new chapter. But there are other forces interested in Uganda. When they went to Moshi, by the way, they said they did not want to see the last leadership of this country. So the people were there said, no, we are not going to have. By the time they ended, the leadership they had kept outside of Moshi became the leader. So that's another journey. We go for another 5 years. Again, a game of chess. Brother against brother again. By 1986, we had a completely different thing. Again, in 1980, by the way, the opposition crossed the floor again. It has become the new game. People moving from one party to another. It's a game. So there's nothing new when you see parties moving here and there. There's nothing. There's nothing new. Now, where is Uganda here? Where is our people? Our people have got a resilience. They have kept seeing all these things and they've kept plodding on. So for us who are interested in Uganda, not in individuals, we are saying this is nothing new. We've seen this before. We want this country to be taken in the right direction. We don't have to copy anybody's system. If those systems have failed, why don't we sit down and find a system that suits us? I'm not saying there's anything wrong. This human rights you're talking about, whatever it is, these guys talk about human rights, then they go to Iraq and Libya, and they go to wherever it is, and the human rights go through the window. So which human rights are we talking about?
And the Gaza. No, our human rights. Our human rights, not anybody's.
No. I'm saying we seem to copy their human rights.
The ones who are architects of human rights.
They are supposed to be architects. They bring sanctions. Now, from there, I don't agree into violence. But violence seems to have been introduced by the British. The British used to beat us to go and plant coffee. That's why they call it kiboko. You had to plant cotton. You had to do this. You were forced. It was forced labor. The army went to Karamoja and virtually destroyed everybody. Violence again. So if you are talking about violence, it did not start today. Then let's move forward. All these little symptoms you are seeing. By 1986, this country was termed as a failed state.
Correct.
And in fact, our economy, we reached an inflation of 200 and something %. Whoever the actors are, and by the way, I don't want us to get it wrong. I'm talking about all political actors. I'm not choosing this one or that one. All of them. They know what has happened to this country. And the people in this country are putting all of them on stage and saying, look, enough is enough. We want something for our children and our grandchildren. So the journey of independence, yes, independence was there. And independence has shown us what has happened. As we talk right now, our population by 2020 was 45.7 million. Should be about 47 now, if we go according to estimates. By the time this government, 61 years ago, when we got independence, I think it was 9 million. You can see the difference. It has increased. Has our economy expanded? That's another question we've got to answer. Luckily, our country is very rich. And luckily, it is agrarian. And therefore, agriculture seems to be there, and we are able to feed our population. But we want our riches, which are there, to be brought back so that our population can get a benefit out of this. So when I hear somebody saying, oh, wait a minute, let's borrow money so that we can have tourism. Oh, it's a noble idea. Why don't we borrow money to smelt all the gold we have? Why don't we borrow money to do the marble we have in Karamoja? Why don't we borrow money to carry out all our minerals we have so that we can get money, so that our people can see? Because this tourism is a very nice thing. It's very noble. Our brothers and sisters in Dubai, when I first went to Dubai, I could only see sand. Today I go to Dubai, I see one of the biggest cities in the world. Really? How many years I'm talking about? Not
50.
more than 20, 30 years. Can we do it? Yes, we can. If we can change our narrative as Ugandans, if we can, first of all, unite our country and we become one. These things that have happened, they have happened. Mistakes have been made. Mismanagement is there. Nobody is refusing. The British also had mismanagement, but our mismanagement is very clear because today's media is faster than what it was then. If we could have had the media we have today with the British, we would have known what they did. Today, when you blink your eyes, when you open them, the media has seen you already. So we are able to see everything that is happening. People who are abusing human rights, everywhere in the world, we have police brutality. You keep on saying, and I've seen this, oh, but you see, Uganda's security, I want you to see what happened when they invaded the Congress. When people invaded the Congress in the United States. Do you know how many security organs went there to stop that? So let us not jump the gun. We need order in this country, but we don't need human abuse, human rights abuse. But we need order. And our order can be brought about by government doing it correctly. So, that said and done, you are asking me 61 years of what? The years have gone by. 61 years have gone by. We could have achieved more, but unfortunately there is a lot of mismanagement. And that mismanagement can be quantified in many different ways. You can look into it into politics. There's poor political management. You can look into the economics, poor economic management. And socially, we have abused our people as far as I'm concerned. We should respect them a little bit more. So, what we need to do now, this independence which we had the other day, we should stop for a moment. What are the mistakes have we made up to now? How can we correct those mistakes? Because a human being is not perfect. You make mistakes, you correct them. These teachers of ours who are here, the professors will tell you, yes, you make a mistake, but correct it.
Yes.
I'm not saying you will not make mistakes. And I'm not saying they have not made mistakes. All I am saying, what mistakes have we made? Can we correct them?
Yes.
For the sake of this nation. And should we stop this nonsense? You are unable to be a leader. You know, you remind me of a man called Ian Smith, who was the man who took over Rhodesia. He said the Africans cannot rule themselves. That was Ian Smith. And I want to tell Ian Smith, yes, we can rule ourselves. Why don't you, wherever he is, I don't know if he's still alive, or where he has gone to see St. Peter. But as far as I'm concerned, Mandela has set us an example. Africans can do it. And there are other leaders who have set us examples. Nyerere, we can do it. And Nyerere suffered, by the way, because he tried very much to unite Tanzania and he lost the economy.
Correct.
He tried very hard to unite Tanzania. Yeah. In fact, he went as far, his vice president was called a man called Kawawa, who everybody said should not have been a vice president. But Nyerere knew why he had him there. The majority of Tanzanians were like Kawawa. And therefore Kawawa united the Tanzanians.
Okay. I'm bringing Dr.
So I want to end by saying that the journey has been bumpy, but whatever mistakes we've made can be corrected.
Dr. Sarah, hearing Captain Babu and hearing Dr. Tango Doi, when you compare countries that received independence around the same period with us, when you look at that comparison, what do you make of where we are and where they are, and what have we done wrong?
Yeah, thank you, Timothy. Let me pick it up from where Captain Babu has stopped on the strength of Tanzania and partly Kenya, because we got independence with a difference of a year with Kenya and Tanzania. The strength of Tanzania is in the language. And that is the nationhood that Mwalimu Nyerere built. Under Kikwete, President Kikwete, when there was debate for change of the constitution, the citizens, because everybody in Tanzania can follow the debates in parliament because they speak one language. So the citizens had debate on land, and they did not agree with what the MPs were saying. They surrounded parliament. When you go to Kenya, Kenya has the advantage of Kiswahili, but also high literacy levels. So whether they are debating in English or Kiswahili, because they debate in both languages, majority of Kenyans are able to follow what their leaders are saying. When it comes to Uganda, just as we were celebrating independence, there was a translator in Kitgum. The president is speaking and then he's waiting, and he might not follow the translation. Even us, as you follow, you miss out on the body language, because communication is not just by word. Communication is mainly by body language. But when we cannot speak to each other in Uganda, when we have people, when you say, and you can see the strength if you follow Ipsos data, the biggest followed media in Uganda are the media using local language. CBS, Akabozi, you go to UBC channels that speak, communicate in local languages, they have the biggest following. Meaning that our people are comfortable following in their indigenous languages. We don't have a national language. We communicate through translators. I know that President Museveni, who is a great Pan-Africanist, and who inspired most of us to really be Pan-Africanists, always hates the Francophone, Anglophone dynamics and Africans failing to speak to each other. But as he speaks of the African continent, Ugandans cannot speak to each other unless we use the colonizers' language. We cannot communicate. And our people do not follow the national discourse the way the Tanzanians follow the national discourse. And this has derailed our democracy. So that is one of the comparisons. If you go to the economy, we have the highest economic, the economic gaps in East Africa. Our income inequality is at 45.6%. This is almost 50-50, and it is worrying. That coefficient gene in incomes is too high. We are building a divided country. If you go to our poverty, the dimension of poverty profile, the latest report, it is extremely worrying. And I will read out some few data. I know when you look at the nominal figures of GDP and the rest, you get a bit comfortable that we are making progress. But when you go to the depth, the extent of deprivation of our people, it's worrying, and I'll read a few statistics. In Busoga, the Uganda Multidimensional Poverty Profile of 2020 released in 2022, Busoga is at 61% in terms of deprivation, people who cannot meet basics. Buked is at 78%, Bugisu is at 72%, Karamoja 76%, Achori 69%. This is abnormally high and unacceptable. When you go to the Bank of Uganda State of the Economy report, the Bank of Uganda stated that only 1% of Ugandans earn 1 million and above. If today you earn 1 million, you cannot meet your basics even for 2 weeks, even if you are a single person after graduation. By the time you pay rent, by the time you transport to and fro, you will not have a balance for food. For any single person in Uganda today, a person living alone with no children, assuming there are no extended families, to comfortably meet your basics, you need to earn a basic salary of 2 million. So when Bank of Uganda releases a report that 1% earn 1 million and above, and this is the working class of Ugandans aged between 18 to 65 years, what does that say of our economy? I know that Kenya has a high debt burden, and we could say they have even scarcity of foreign exchange. We could say their economy is facing turbulence, but they have a strong economy. They have a stronger economy. This is the strongest in East Africa. When you go to Tanzania, they are a bit stable. I have not looked at their multidimensional poverty profiles because I'm not interested for obvious reasons. Is high and it should be rectified. The recent report by ADB shows that 16.36 million released last month. 16.36 million people are living in extreme poverty in Uganda. This is 36% of our population. I think these are figures not to be celebrated. When you look at overall GDP, inflation, and the rest, you get comfortable that we are maybe making progress. But how many people are making progress? 10% of the extreme rich in Uganda share 36% of GDP. Then you have 30% of extreme poor sharing less than 10% of GDP. These income inequalities must be addressed in an urgent manner. When you look at the time of independence, part of the strength of the economy that Captain Francis Babu rightly talked about, the pillars of the economy were enshrined in the cooperative movement system. The cooperative movement that created market for produce, that created agricultural extension services for farmers, that created fertilizers for people, that created all these benefits. We lost that system. At independence, even up to 1986 when President Museveni came to power, we had a functionary system. Part of the cooperative movement system had Uganda Transport, Corporation, had the cooperative, the coffee marketing board, the cotton marketing board, and the rest of that. We lost that infrastructure. That was the bedrock of the economy that could survive Idi Amin's chaos, that could survive all the economic, political turbulence of the time. Today, our economy has no shield. And those are the challenges that we should address as a nation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. I think let's take a break, and when we come back, we want to be able to talk about nation building as a country there. How do we come from a state to a nation, or how do we become a republic, even with this diversity that we have of 50 plus languages here? This and more after this break.
Pay or shop with MTN Momo and get cashback every week. It's free of charge.
wano nno tuli bukoto era lero we tugenda okugaba pichipichi yaffe eri omuwanguzi waffe wano we tuzze.
I'm so excited and I'm sure even all the people, all the staff at Kwaliwath, they're all excited. We thank you very, very much.
Myaka 25 nga MTN ewereza naye nga buli week tugaba pichipichi 5.
Very, very excited. I'm excited about MTN giving back to its customers. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much, MTN.
The fact that we have won really shows that people like Mama. Their services are really nice. MTN, your services are okay. The network is good. We are satisfied.
Chikola sense ne?
Use the Momo app or dial *165 *3#.
Tata ni Mama Sarah.
Wanji?
We did all we could. Naye we couldn't save her. I'm sorry. You brought her in very late. Malaria destroyed her organs and reduced her blood levels. She was anemic. You know how dangerous malaria is. I am sorry, but malaria has killed your daughter.
Malaria kills more people in Uganda than any other disease. Protect your loved ones from this enemy. Ensure everyone in your family sleeps under a mosquito net every night, whether it's a cold or hot season, to protect them from malaria. In the event that any of your family members shows malaria signs and symptoms, take them to the nearest health center immediately to prevent complications from malaria that could result into death. Together, we can chase malaria out of Uganda. This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Health with support from Global Fund.
What's the best kind of business to invest in? One that connects Ugandans border to border with a high-speed broadband 4G and is the first to launch 5G? What about one of the largest corporate income taxpayers in our country? Oh, the fastest growing telecom in the last 5 years. Wow! Well, here's a chance to invest it all. Take part in Airtel's initial public offering today for as little as 100 Ugandan shillings per share. Remember, a retail investor gets 5 incentive shares for every 100 they buy and 6 incentive shares if they purchase using Airtel Money. Dial *185 *85# now to get started.
I wish you maintain that same effort to protect you and your family from that very dangerous ship that attacks you every night. And if you don't take action soon, it may cost your life or even your pregnant wife to lose her baby.
Wapi, with all these original padlocks and my maguja, no thief can make an attempt to break in.
Simon, you and your wife are always in and out of the hospital almost every month. And there is that dangerous thief that you are not yet safe from. You're lucky that for now, it's only robbing you money.
Malaria is a thief. Don't let it rob you and your loved ones. Prevent it by sleeping under a mosquito net every night. For pregnant women, go for antenatal care and get your Fansida medicine to protect you and your unborn baby from malaria.
Juko. Yo. Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better.
PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
Are you tired of high fees and slow transfer time when sending money? Airtel Money is here to revolutionize the way you move your money. We have revised our rates Pakaku ground. Sending money from Airtel to other networks in Uganda, East Africa, and to the rest of the world has never been more affordable. Dial *185# and start sending money. Switch to Airtel Money today and experience unbeatable rates and top-notch services for all your local and international money transfer needs. Airtel Money, instant, secure, borderless.
Tubaniriza mu Jinja Central Market twidi wano okubanga twedusa abantu okuwaayo kumbaga ya mwenemu nga bakozesa momope kati je mu Jinja Central Market sobola okubanga tuwayana abatyambye momope neri kwogeza abantu obwama
tamu ndalo otemu mukaga otemu itanga otemu sita onige isatu onige ash onige yes
ayi nga tuwaayo tikashi nga tuwaayo nga tubita ku momope enkola ya MTN miga 70
Pay or shop with MTN Momo and get cash back every week. It's free of charge. Use the Momo app or dial *165*3#.
Commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. I am joined by Professor Sarah Sadi, Dr. Tango Doi, Dr. Sarah Birete, and Captain Francis Babu to discuss the independence of this country. Where did we come from, and where are we going? But let me get to some of your feedback before I engage my panelists here. Good evening, our good host of today. For me, I am so excited to have Dr. Sarah Birete back on board. I sincerely missed her brilliant debate. Sylvester Monday there. Dr. Sarah already getting some... the biggest disservice we have done to ourselves is hanging on the Western governance systems. The things we cut and paste of democracy. Elections, parliament, we do not understand them. We do not even live by them. We do not practice them. We should evolve to our own governance systems and understand them, the systems that can live with us. Aboki Fred from Wakiso, okay? The next one is, politically, we have wobbled, as Dr. Sarah intimated. A strong correlation between politics and economics exists. As we talk about good GDP, we can ascertain that 25 commercial banks that have been in this country don't belong to us, but 2 small ones are locally owned, okay? John Abaho from Chengira there. Finally, lastly but not least, Dr. Sarah is smart and intelligent. I wish she could stand for the presidency. I'll vote for the first time. Joshua from Kasese. I think there's 1 vote here for Dr. Sarah already. Where is Uganda now, with the army 90% involved in the politics and the previous elections at 61? Don't you think 61 is still a lag behind? 61 years and people are still being forced to lead and they do not elect. 61 years and still now, children are still learning in grass-thatched houses in some parts of the country. 61 years of corruption as merit. Dr. Tango Doi, what is this? Philip from Karamoja there. Dr. Tango Doi, you can start from there.
I think, Phil, thank you very much for your concern. And it's very good for people to be concerned about what's happening and what's wrong within our system. And that sense of awareness is also what we should credit NLM for. Awareness and being able to put it to the public like you've done. Because if we still have grass-thatched houses, our question is, when shall we move further than those to make them good classrooms? One thing I think I always have about Uganda is that I have hope. Because I'm not as young as so young, but I've also seen Uganda move, and I can see we are moving the right direction. What we need now is to institutionalize what we call leadership. The blame game here is always on President Museveni. The issue is each and every of us must be a leader in one way or the other. I'm a frequent visitor in Kampala, because if I have time, I stay more in Tororo. And I always ask the people of Tororo, yes, we are actually down from what we used to be. But what are our local leaders, leaders at different states, leaders at different levels? What is the conversation? Not that we should not converse about how we should transform our areas. But you find us, the leadership in Tororo, and I will say this without fear of contradiction, is always embedded in simplicities about this town is ours, we want a district, what multiplicity of ethnic districts. You ask yourself, if President Museveni comes here, why don't we engage, or if a Minister of Finance comes here, Minister of Mineral, Energy and Mineral Development, why don't we engage them on what Tororo has, which can be used to transform Tororo and transform the neighborhood? After the collapse of the cotton industry, Tororo has nothing to bend to. We don't have land to call fertile land and large expanse of land to cultivate like our fathers used to do. We don't have cattle because of the tsetse fly infestation, which should have been handled by leaders in that sector. We can't say we have anything beyond education. Now, even when you find education, you find people minimizing what is there, yet they don't have another alternative. And we as leaders from Tororo, from parliament, from different sectors, not even coming together to talk about our own area. The only thing is government has failed to develop this and the other. It's just like the statistics Sarah was giving. This boardroom statistics, where the poverty level of Uganda is put at a very high rate. I always ask myself, you economists, don't we have those interventions which make that statistics drop? Should it always remain 68%? I asked one time when we had a meeting. Economists came and said, you know, the poverty level is 68%. I said, you gave us this thing 4 years ago. Government has been making interventions. Can't you, for once, scale down to tell us the reality of those interventions? So I think we need to have conversation without blame. You may blame the government, and someone says Sarah can make a very good president. You may find Sarah ruling for less than 41 days.
You want
less than a week.
She will actually become a victim of her own success. She will have succeeded to the extent that viewers are saying Sarah is our next president. The NRM government right now is suffering from its own success. It has widened the economy. There is a scale of liberalization. Everyone can sell whatever one can land hands on to make a living. Trading centers have become trading centers everywhere, and town councils. It has attracted people, town councils have attracted the youth, possible to leave education and go into playing games, roulette, you know, these games of football. They know more about Arsenal and Man U than they know about even their courtiers. We are supposed to go back to what leaders should be. From every village, what is the conversation the LOCs are having? What conversation do you have around your villages? We should not wait for President Museveni and then retire into a blame game. I liked Sarah's submission on account that it has very good statistics. The source not disclosed.
African Development Bank and Ipsos.
African Development Bank
and Ipsos.
Yes. Of 2020.
No. Just Mr. Moderator, the African Development Bank Outlook report on the economy in East Africa is last month.
I don't know why you're defensive.
No. I just want to clarify, just even for the benefit of viewers, I'm not on defensive. The poverty multidimensional report of Uganda, what the statistics were done in 2020, released 2022. Ipsos report is last quarter. Those are the references I made. I'm just for the benefit of viewers.
Thank you. Thank you. The next president of a banana republic outside here. So what I'm saying is that let us sit and dissect the problem of Uganda from an angle of contribution. What contribution are you making to your immediate surrounding to even lift them and lift their awareness that outside government effort they can also rise? I think that's a very big thing we must do. We must not just look onto the parliamentarians for handouts, the president to come and liberate us because we have this and the other. So you find that religious leaders are looking to him, cultural leaders are looking to him, even the MPs, like Sarah said, are looking to him. Yes, he is the leader, but what are we doing as leaders in our different capacities? Lastly, poverty is a very dangerous thing. Poverty brings a lot of unnecessary. It brings a lot of division. It brings a lot of lamentation of the haves and have-not, to the extent that even when someone is given what can benefit them, like the PDM now, if you see that bullet called PDM, well managed, without these corrupt tendencies which are coming in, derailing it, that should have been, or that will be, and should be, the real magic bullet. Because if you concentrate 100 million in a parish, the only thing I think I agree with Professor Suruma is that maybe we should have had maybe 2 years to plan that 100 million. 2 years to plan maybe the parish banks, how the people, to reorient them on how they will use that money to try to uplift themselves.
Dr. Tang, just at that point of PDM, you gave an example of Tororo, talked about sese flies, talked about no cotton. PDM is a blanket program. Is it one shoe fits all for Busia, Tororo, Ankole?
If you see the pillars of PDM, and if PDM, like I was saying, is well managed, and if the people are kind of reoriented mindset, you have to have 1 million shillings. The first thing is, what are you going to do with 1 million shillings? I see them buying TVs, which is not bad. Buying big mattresses to sleep comfortably. So that the social index also goes what? Up.
By Ipsos.
So that if they view
we will
behind
win the happiness index.
We've always won the happiness index.
We are the happiest whatever in the continent. If they, for example, view behind the headlines and people are talking, like Sarah said rightly, I think Sarah Honorable, that in local language, they would understand what should be done. But then that expose needs us to plan better. So what I'm saying is, this country is moving, to me, very well. The only thing is, can we be able to interrogate every project? Before it goes to another level, can we make a review of where it failed, how we can improve it?
Thank you.
Because Sarah will come and say there was Bonaba Gagawale, which is true. There was
wealth creation,
wealth creation, which is true. There was Intandekwa, which is true. These
so what
should
is
be
different now?
These programs have benefited Ugandans, but we need a review of a program before start of another.
Okay, let me bring in Professor. Professor, something that I heard from Dr. Sarah and Captain Francis Babu about the difference in the pockets of our tribes there and trying to build these different states into one nation. How do we have nation building of this country moving forward?
Okay, thank you very much, Timothy. I want to start by saying that each country has its own internal contradictions. So if you're thinking of nation building or of planning for any society, I think we have to begin by understanding what that society is. And I know it's very good to borrow from the neighbors, but we can make a comparison. When we talk as Africans about our African countries, the challenge is always how we are not doing as well as others. In short, others set for us the standard, which we must, even if we come to the region. That's why we are hearing here the Tanzanians did this, the Kenyans are doing this. I've always wondered, are we aware of what Uganda is about and what we want to achieve? When other people talk about their countries, like the Europeans, they are not talking about, oh, how Britain needs to be like France. They are talking about what do they need to build as a British identity. What do they need to build as an American identity? What do they need to build as a French identity? So I think one of the things we need to think about is, first of all, understand who we are and what do we want, and what our internal contradictions are as a place. I know we're all ruled by colonizers, but there are things within us that made us evolve differently. So the issue is not to force Uganda against a template. And I'm not saying there are no good things to borrow from elsewhere. But as we borrow, we have to know what is the basic mold we are working with. Otherwise, we shall always see Uganda as a deviant form. And it's not just Uganda, another group of people who always see their country as a deviant form are Nigerians. If you believe nothing works there because it's not like this, it's not like this, you say, okay, then what is it like? No one has a clue. And we should avoid being a people who always think we should be this, we should be the other, we should be the other, but we cannot make out what this is. So first we have to understand, what is the Uganda we want to build? What is the history that has defined that place called Uganda? And it's good to look at history and how far we have come, but also to analyze that history and what we are as a people. When I talk about the contemporary internal contradictions, we are living in an era where it is very easy to access information, but also where there's a lot of ignorance of even the history of this country. We have information readily accessible to us in the palm of our hands, but many people don't very much know about the history of this country, or the little they have had is from maybe a talk show or from whatever they have had, and depending on how good or bad what they had was, or how biased it was, they'll have a biased perspective. We are living in an era where there's a lot of growth, but of course with a lot of income inequality. Everyone has talked about that. We are living in an era where there's a lot of potential unity in that we should be more cohesive because of ease of transportation. But it is also an era where we are beginning to see ethnic divisions coming up, threatening unity. So these internal contradictions are there. So how do we plan for this place? And I think in planning for this place, we should not just be experts of an earlier version of the world, as Graham talks about it. We should also be, in as much as we were experts of what happened yesterday, we should also open our minds to understanding contemporary challenges and also trying to understand them and resolve them. So you are asking, what do we need to do to build a united Uganda in view of the differences we have in terms of ethnicities and identities and the rest? I think one problem we are suffering with as a country, and I'm talking about Uganda, and maybe with a few African countries I'm aware of, there are two sectors that have grown in this post-independence era, especially after the World Bank reforms or privatization, which actually introduced a lot of precarity in our lives and a lot of uncertainty. One of those has been religion. So everybody, wherever you go, you'll see someone preaching somewhere and whatever. So that aspect has grown. The other aspect which has grown is the political. So there's a lot of discussion of the political. There's a lot of organization of the political. So we are moving from one election to another. We are moving from one talk show around politics to another talk show. You talked about how do we organize ourselves when the president is coming to Tororo, but you see, even with that, people are not going to say, oh, this is an opportunity where we can grab a ginnery, if at all a ginnery is what you need. It will be still, the other people are having more, we also need to have access. So we have over-politicized. 90% of the talk shows or the discussions, even if you're talking about a classroom or a debate in a school or in a university, is around the politics. When you invited me to this panel, and when I was coming, I was wondering, is there a space where we can also privilege the discussion around the economics, around the social, around the cultural? If you go to some places, like Mauritius has, people have museums of the economy. So what has Uganda's economy been like, and what has it grown? How has it grown over the times? We just want to tell people, And I agree there's a value in cooperatives. Let's go back to the cooperatives. But we have an understanding of how the cooperatives worked beyond an academic paper. Because, of course, if you come to a university and the library, the academic papers around that. But would it have helped to have a museum around the economy? Mauritius, for example, has a museum of the economy, or a museum of the bank of that. So you can go in and see how this little country has evolved. And Little Rwanda, it has a very high index. Do we have a museum where people can go to see how our health system has evolved, how our agriculture has evolved? Right now, actually, we are seeing more people going into commercial agriculture and big high-tech farms coming. We are still locked in the mold of peasantry. Okay? So is there a place where we can privilege discussions around the evolution of the agriculture, the evolution of the economy, the evolution of the healthcare system? And that's where maybe the countries that seem to be better than us have done better. If you, I did my PhD in the UK, but one thing, before, and it was in health systems, one thing you had to start with is to study the British economic and social history.
Social history.
Because of the belief that how the economy and the society is organized gives birth to the particular, because I was in health systems, to the kind of health system you have. So you cannot dream of everybody having a national health service when there's no economy to support it. So all these things move together. And that's why the NHS only came in much later in life, in as much as that country had been very mercantile in a very long time. So if we are to plan for Uganda so that we are united, where do we go back to? Beyond the stories we tell. Do we have a documented economic and social history of Uganda? So, and when you go to the UK, you talk about 1700. That's where you have initial discussions. So then you can then ably say, to build a free national health service, you need to have this kind of economy. So if we are to build a true national identity of Uganda, or to provide agriculture this way, what kind of economy do we need? And how valid? Because Dr. Tang is doubting Dr. Sarah's statistics. So how valid would that be? So we need the history of things. So it's not just a matter of moving from one talk show to another about how which president did whichever president. By the way, every president performs as per the circumstances around them. Okay? And there has been a lot of growth even in the last 40 years. But this cannot be privileged because we are trying to find out who is better than the other and passing judgment. And we are losing sight of what would have developed. By the way, whether you talk, even if someone else was in charge, because the social drivers of that kind of system need to be put in place. So we need to do that. So now we go back to how do we then move to build a national identity. First, you need people to believe in this country. But for people to believe in this country, you know, a national identity and nationalism or patriotism are not naturally occurring genetic factors. That because you are born here, therefore you're Ugandan. I mean, there are people who have relinquished citizenship and gone to other countries and they're thriving. And we don't have a problem with them. But the point is, to build a national character has to be a daily engagement. Okay? That's why people, Dr. Sarah Virete talked about people following media houses that speak their local language because they cultivate that identity on a daily. Okay? If you're not doing it on the talk show, you're doing it when you go to a burial, you're doing it when you go to a wedding or a kwanjula, you mean you have to bring certificates. So tribal identity is being cultivated on a daily. Religious identity is being cultivated on a daily. That's why people, some people pray 5 times a day. Those who don't pray 5 times a day, that is pray in the morning or pray in the evening. And if you're liberal Pentecostal like some of us, you are told any time is prayer time. So as you drive, you pray. And so that is being cultivated. So now we come back to building a national identity. By the way, even that can be done. And I've said here before, when we were in primary school, we sang the national anthem every parade. Do we have parades in schools today? We don't. We had the pictures of the heads of state everywhere. Okay, for us in the university we have them. I hope everyone else has them. Then I mean, it was an intentional, concerted effort about building a Ugandan identity of a particular caliber. So we cannot leave it to free fall because neoliberalism told the state to retreat and then privatization took over. So for me, if in my school I don't want to do certain things and in your school you want to do them, therefore you continue. We have to have a basic of what is the kind of Uganda we want to build. We don't necessarily want to build a Uganda which is like Tanzania. But we have a lot, we can borrow from Tanzania, we can borrow from Kenya. But imagining that these were 3 brothers that have matured differently, and you're not going to return them to the same house, how do you nurture them so that they are different, but successful? So being a person of, having a national identity has to be cultivated. You saw how during the COVID times, when each time the president started to give us national direction on the COVID lockdown, whether extension, people got glued. People waited for what he had to say. And when he stopped saying what he had to say, and people were violating the COVID rules, was like, the president has stopped speaking to us. So we assume it is free. So that was just an example that actually you can forge Ugandans to focus on one thing. So we need to go back and after we've identified and defined what we want to be, then say, okay, what will this curriculum look like? What are our entry points? Do we begin at nursery school? Do we begin at primary school? Do we begin? And then also bringing people to engage. And sometimes I find more faith in people who are not very highly educated, because maybe that is all the faith they have. Whereas the elites, we are thinking of the next place which is better than this.
Better than us.
So if you can get a job in the US, you can get a job there. So we have sort of a divided loyalty. But there are these people, whether they're in Chikubo, whether they have a lot of hope and they're making things work. And sometimes you wonder, why don't we have as much hope as they have? Is it because they know little? So we can build a national identity, but we have to be concerted. We have to be intentional about building it. And we begin by defining. So the president is doing something about the national addresses, but I think we need to cascade that to lower levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And let me come to Captain Francis Babu. Some of the things that Professor Sarah has spoken about, national identity, national character there, but also when you look at the speech of the president, his stress was majorly on politics of identity versus interest there. This is murky waters from way back, from the different tribes that are there. How do we navigate this not to become a time bomb for nation building?
Thank you very much. Let me start off initially by talking about the area she was talking about, the contradictions and the conflicts that exist in society. First and foremost, if you go and look at the conflict theory, it tells you that conflict is perpetual.
Yeah, it's part of society.
Are there.
And therefore, you need managers who can manage that conflict.
Yeah.
And that group, that's why we come with these words like leadership. We're talking about a manager who can lead and resolve those conflicts. Now, to be able to achieve what she's talked about, you need real leadership. Now that leadership has before, in fact recently we got a little bit test of it when we got a man called President Magufuli. In a short period of time, he sort of transformed that leadership in a certain direction. Whether correctly or wrongly, but he did.
He tried.
So I wanted us to look very carefully. To manage society, which is the definition of politics, you need basically to get people who can resolve the conflicts within those societies. Earlier on when I started, I told you that we had different nationalities put together to make this country called Uganda. They still exist. What we need to do, how do we bring them together? Now this is where we need what she was saying. We don't need mediocres here. We need experts who can tell us how we can bring them together. She brought the language. But a great admirer, I'm a great admirer of Lee Kuan Yew, who was the Prime Minister of Singapore. You asked me which country has done so well, where we got the independence about the same time. Actually, Singapore got the independence around the same time as Uganda. And Singapore went from the third to the first world. But it's a smaller place, a different contradiction compared to ours, a different conflicts. So we need now to look at ours. How do we get our country from the third to the first world?
Exactly.
What do we do? Therefore, the first thing we need to do, we need to get the 3 words that Lee Kuan Yew used. He used the word MPH, which stood for meritocracy, where you have people in leadership who have got merit. And then he used the word pragmatism, which brought us to have the word to have your country at your heart. I don't want to use that word everybody is using nowadays. Because they use it in a very funny way. They even have formed associations.
Patriotic clubs.
To be patriotic. Patriotism is in the heart. It's not in associations. Pragmatism, to have that force that drives you. Then honesty. One word, honesty. Can our leaders be honest enough to unite this country? The president gave you 8 points?
Yes.
They are fantastic. Are we honest enough to implement them? The word is what? Honesty. In Uganda, I want to assure you, we have very bright people. If you go in the Ministry of Finance, in the different ministries, they have researches that have been done, and they've got policies that if they were to implement, Uganda would be in utopia. We have them. If we could implement them today, Uganda would change. And don't be deceived, they are made by Ugandans. They are written by these professors of ours and others. You heard the other day, a professor in Makerere University invented a vet drug. When these one coming from foreign countries were not helping us, they came up with something that is now working on our animals. Which means we have people who have got the potential to do this thing. So, to be able, forget about propaganda. There's a lot of propaganda, a lot of spinning, there's a lot of mistakes that have been made. I agree entirely. I'm not going to refuse. Even some accusations might be correct. How do we correct those accusations? How do we make it better for our children and our grandchildren? So, your question, to make this country, first of all, and let me tell you, no matter what, you will not run away from it. You've got to unite this country. I don't know where the kind of cement you need to unite it. But we need to find the cement that can unite our country. If one of them is languages, like she said, fine. By the way, in the parliament, we passed a long time ago that we have 2 languages, English and Swahili is the other one. Can we now...
official language, not national.
Not national, but we want to make it, we'd like to make it national if we can.
Official.
Yeah. We start slowly.
Then we got
So, that's one. The other one, other people, we are brothers, by the way. I don't know why we waste our time on this tribalism thing. That thing was being used by people to disunite us. When you talk about tribes, don't Europeans have tribes?
They do.
How come they have united them? Don't Indians have tribes? In fact, there is more tribes in India than there are in Uganda here. But they are uniting them slowly. The question is, can we unite ours? And we get a common denominator.
What is that common denominator?
In the foundation, if we were united, believe you me, things would work very fast for us. Earlier on, you were saying if the president went to Tororo, they would ask for what? What did you say? You said they'd ask for something.
No, he was talking about sister flies and I was asking, does PDM, is it one shoe fits all?
No, I think I said, if the president goes to Tororo today, like we'll go over the weekend or the other day,
yes,
they'll not ask him how to actually make the fertilizer industry bring productivity to the common person. They'll ask him why he has not given them a small
district. Yeah, the district.
I'm saying from
now, I was coming,
Yes.
I didn't want to go into the PDM. I know you're talking about poverty alleviation and all, poverty eradication. By the way, the best model in the world was done by a man in Bangladesh, a professor. And this is where the PDM thing comes from, where you have the village banks. The village bank was done by that professor. It is one of the best in the world. In fact, he has got accolades for it. The question is, can we? And that's what Suruma was telling you. By the way, when you quoted Suruma, I could see that man. Because Suruma is on the same, on the same platform.
Banks.
The parish model can work. All these models we have here can work. We have just failed to have the management for them.
Exactly.
And this is what I keep on going on. If you keep on hearing me talking about management, I'm not being fussy about it. I'm saying everything needs management because there's conflict all the time. So you need somebody who can put those conflicts and use them as a force to get what they want. Vector them into a force. So this is something we need to sit down with people, not with the people who are looking for tomorrow's 40 million or whatever it is, but people who are really serious. People who want this country changed, not for their benefit, but for the benefit of all of us. And this is where sometimes people don't like when we say these things, but a few people in this country have not done well for this country.
Okay.
And so I would like to end by saying, to unite us, you need to bring us together and tell people, look, these small differences, you know, we had religious wars in this country. We are one. Earlier on, I told you how to greet people. I meant it. Let us unite. Number two, these tribes, there is no tribal differences here. They are so small, the differences are so minute that it doesn't make sense for us to waste our time. The other one is the political parties. You know, political parties divide us more than anything else. That you put on a red color, a blue color, a green color, a yellow color. I find it extremely ridiculous. In fact, sometimes I wonder, why do we waste our time? So those things, we can overcome them, and all of us become one and unite ourselves and move this country forward.
Thank you very much, Captain. Dr. Sarah, let me come to you. I know you have seen these different exhibitions that have been on X, on formerly Twitter, especially putting different names there. This tribal sentiment could be a time bomb for us. The president talked about, saying politics of identity, religion, but tribe has become something very dear that could cause an implosion in this country. What are your thoughts on it? And my second question to you, in the 8 ingredients of the president, he talked about corruption. Why are we failing to deal with 10 trillion stolen every year, and the IG is only recovering 8.9 billion shillings? Even less than 10%.
Yeah, thank you very much. Allow me first make a comment on the form of democracy. There is a growing school of thought that this Western democracy has failed in Africa. It's not just in Uganda, and even when we're at the Africa Summit for Democracy, it's a growing tendency. And especially when you look at the East African country, I will look at Uganda, Kenya, and the modes of democracy that we implement. We have adaptive democracy. Uganda has the parliament, the 3 arms of government, but we also have decentralization. Even beyond the decentralization, we have cultural institutions. This mode of democracy is not just imported, we have modified it. When you go to Kenya, they have devolution. Now the counties in Kenya are doing miracles and competing with each other. And I've listened to a few mayors and local government leaders saying they want more power at city status, and they want economic zones so that they can compete with each other. Because if you look at the productivity of the country, I think it's important to underscore the fact that 70% of our GDP is got through Greater Kampala. Kampala Wakiso Mukono. And then you have the rest of 129 districts. They are bringing tangible resources on table. So we need to make the whole country productive. We need to look at options we can use, adaptive options. And I think our democracy is largely adaptive. It's not merely imported, copy and paste. If you go to the US, they have a different model together with the Congress, Senate, with the Vice President being President of Senate, and all that fusion of separation of powers. That is not the case in Europe and other countries. So we can debate what is more suitable for us and make it more adaptive to our peculiar conditions. But I think we shouldn't create an impression that it's a cut and paste when it is not. At one point, we had a movement system, a form of democracy that was not anywhere. It was Ugandan. So we can make it more adaptive to what we want it to be. After all, democracy is a governance of the people, for the people and by the people. So let the people see what more adaptive modes we can import into the way we want to be governed, and let it be. So going back to your question on tribalism, there is a growing tendency on tribalism, and I happen to come from the West, where people look at us as people in things, or as we commonly say, in Chintu. But where I come from, you can hardly name people. I think we have one permanent secretary in Bushenyi, and that's a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. We have a few top posts in the government, in the army. You can name them. The three most prominent. We have three most prominent positions as Bushenyi. So these insinuations at the end of the day, like Captain Babu says, when you draw a closer touch, you might fail to find something tangible to work with. I know that if you look at some countries in the West that spread through the cattle corridor, they stretch to Masaka, they stretch to Buganda, and you don't know whether they are, so will you call them Westerners because they are members of the cattle corridor, or they are from the central? With the level of intermarriages, my children are from a different tribe than myself. My children are Baganda. So then are you going to say these are what tribe will you call them? What tribe will you call my family? So we have really demystified these lines of saying this tribe is so and so. We have a lot of migrations. I know there were tensions in Bunyoro that Bachiga at one point were taking over the political leadership. And then there was an attempt to say, no, please don't contest. And there was...
And you think it has died out?
No. Yeah, but so what I'm saying is, it is spread through. So if you say you are looking, I think we need to streamline the way government people access government jobs by promoting meritocracy. And then that will address the issue. If there is transparency, there are national jobs, they are advertised, they are competed for fairly, and the best candidates take them. Yeah. But I know also that our constitution provides for regional balance in the national objectives and directives of state policy.
Just once more.
You want to give me information?
Yeah, no, not to give you information, but to just help your point. I think there's something Dr. Tanga talked about of how poverty is bad, okay? Whenever there is scarcity of resources, which has occurred because our population has increased, so we are many more people chasing opportunities, and the opportunities haven't multiplied as fast. So whenever there is scarcity of resources, people then go into identifying who should and who shouldn't have. So I think, for me, what manifests as tribalism is just a sign that we should do more at building a national character and building a nationalism, and the patriotism of Captain doesn't take seriously. Because the whole issue is, you know, when we were ruled by divide and rule, the locus of development was in the regions and the tribes and everything. When we got independence, we had those upheavals we had. Then after 1987, when maybe we should have been forging towards a national character to remove tribalism and other ethnicities, World Bank lands and privatizes so many things, and the state is reduced to a few things. So I think when now people look back in memory, they look back at how the colonial state was organized, and they think that would have been a better thing. So this is a sign that we actually, to undo that, we need to be more intentional about building a national identity. Because if we don't build a national identity, people will fall back to the default position. And remember, as I said, tribal identity is being cultivated and navigated on a daily. We need to do something similar for national identity. Okay. Whether we want to believe it's there or not, people will relapse into these things. So we need to counter them by being intentional about the national project.
Dr. Sarah. If I may get my time back, thanks a lot, namesake, for that submission. So the conclusion on tribalism, is that we need to promote transparency and meritocracy in the way national jobs are competed for. And the best qualified people should take the jobs. So if I go to the president's 8 points, overall, the president's 8 points are good. What I find painful, though, is that they look like a foundation. After 37 years in power, you are talking about emancipating private sector. You are talking about economic infrastructure, including a railway. I think it's important to note that when President Museveni took over power, we had a functional railway system. It could have had challenges, but we had a functional railway system. And as he spent more time in power, not only did we lose the railway, but we also lost the rails. The rails. you find the plants growing through where the railway used to be. Recently, there were attempts to revamp the railway, and the people purchased fake locomotives, which Parliament wrote off as non-function, and we lost money. But also, for about now 15 years, the foundation for the standard gauge railway, East Africa standard gauge railway, was laid in Mnyonyo by our president. But we haven't even laid a brick when we have a foundation standard gauge railway working in Kenya and Tanzania. In Uganda, we have nothing. We are still dealing with swamps and procurement of land. So I find that really there is a problem.
There's no positive, Sarah.
No. But these are facts. If we have a standard gauge railway, show me where it is.
No.
I want to use it.
Okay.
Yes. So if you look at, if you want to look at eliminating corruption, but before I come to your question, exactly, environment, we've lost more than 60% of forest cover under NRM leadership. We've lost 80% of wetlands under NRM leadership. These are statistics with our national institutions. So NRM has presided over environmental degradation. And mainly, it is the big wings that are grabbing forests. Mabira Forest, we have lost 186 acres of Mabira Forest. Recently, there was a documentary on how people are doing charcoal in Mabira on a daily, harvesting timber with no rule of law, with no protection. We have lost half. Mabira Forest is transparent from the Ginger Highway. You can look through the trees under this leadership of Tango Doya and colleagues. So when it comes to corruption, I think there is no political commitment to fighting corruption. We have been paying lip service at a political level to the fight against corruption. We have the laws. We have, when there is a new challenge, we keep creating new institutions. When ideally the DPP and IGG would have been sufficient if they were fully resourced and equipped to fight corruption. But as the IGG, I think from Justice Faith Monda and others, they've always said, Faith Monda was very clear, saying that the problem when he tries to catch thieves, they end up in State House, and then they become untouchable. When you go to the current IGG, Honorable Beth Kamya, she has tried to revive the citizen engagement in the fight against corruption. It's a nice attempt. I wish she could keep on and do much more of the people, using the people to fight corruption. She has recovered 8.89, around there, billion in the last 1.5 years. But she has been on record saying we lose 10 trillion every year. So she has not even recovered 5% of the money that this country loses to corruption. There has been talk of e-government under the manifesto. So we are halfway into the manifesto. Part of the NDP3, part of PDM and my friend Ramadan Ngobi's governance, where anchored around e-governance to eliminate corruption, to eliminate people-to-people interaction in procurement, and try to phase out corruption. I am definite that that will remain lip service until we go into the next election. When you look at the way the president handles the people next to him, I will use the Karamoja and Sheets saga, where 24 ministers were involved in partaking of the iron sheets meant for the vulnerable Karamoja people for restoration of the Karachunas. No action. Even when the president wrote a very strong worded letter that he will not hesitate to take action. Up to now, there is zero action on that matter, and the buck, Mr. President, stops with you. I think there is no political commitment to fight.
Thank you very much.
The standard gauge, Larry. Uganda, unless if they're going to build a standard gauge to run within Uganda,
exactly,
they cannot build a standard gauge railway until Kenya has arrived on around our border. So we have now gone back to the 1 meter gauge railway, which no, that we are already doing it. They are already doing it.
I'm from
now 1 meter gauge railway is the old one, which they are repairing now. Now the standard gauge railway will only be started in this country when those people have either got to Malaba or to Busia, so that we can connect. We unless if we are, by the way, we can start standard gauge railway for Uganda only.
Yes.
So that we are rotating.
But Tanzania uses.
I can tell you.
Yes, Dr.
Is it my turn? First of all, I think let's start from what we should be, what we are, and what we remain. We are Ugandans. With due respect to my elder, when I hear examples of a nationalist leader being picked from Tanzania, I feel it is one of the examples to give, but we have the nearest example here. I don't know whether you've studied the history of Uganda. You better have a conversation with Honorable Babu, Honorable Mayengo. I think Honorable Mayengo is a monarchist, but very good historian. Professor Luanga Lunyigo is still alive. The destruction Uganda went through the divide and rule policy. You people, if you read the instance of divide and rule, this country, which had been the bedrock of nationalities, was reduced to conflict ethnicities. We are not ethnic groups, we are nationalities. Buganda, Bunyorokitara, expanses of kingdoms. Now, when this destruction came because the British wanted to give us Uganda as a British empire. And it remained so even at independence time. I remember when Honorable Babu said, you have a president who's a monarchist at independence, but you have a prime minister who's a Republican, Milton Obote. Why were they to conflict? They couldn't avoid conflict because of their orientation, that they are Republican, this one is a monarchist, without seeing Uganda as the ground for the two parties fighting. Now, when you see the writings, when you read the writings of President Museveni, when you read about his own personal intervention in his area, you may say he's just talking because he's a leader. But if you follow that example, what he's trying to do is trying to inculcate in all Ugandans a sense of leadership and commitment to their own areas. Not that you should be tribalistic, if there's any tribe at all, but what can you do as an example to the surrounding areas? We have adopted we came from a pre-capitalist economy into a capitalist economy, and we are now so selfish that we are able even to build walls in the villages. You build a house, you build a wall, on top of a wall you put iron bars, and then you put razor wires and electric wire.
That's the reality.
What are you doing to the surrounding? You are happy when your immediate neighbor is poor. Go to Tanzania, which has been quoted. In 1967, Tanzania tried the African socialism and the Ujamaa. It was a sense of going back to traditional Africa, that Africans will live and survive with one another. Yes, of course, the capitalist economy, the capitalists fought it. And Tanzania had a very downtrend in its economy. But it inculcated a sense of Ubuntu, a sense of we are one in them. You come to Kenya here, a settler colony, where they promoted the Kikuyu, the fertile area kind of development against the others. Predominantly, they left the cattle keepers behind, the arid areas of the north. The interventions which have come is just because of, especially I think the Kibaki regime, that economist. He did a lot there. Now, here, we get a country described as the Pearl of Africa. We destroy it to the extent that this tribe does not see the so-called tribes. This group does not see the other eye to eye. To the extent that our elders would ask you, why are you buying land in Buganda? You will lose it. Because they grew up in that kind of history. Now, that is the history, and I think I agree with Honorable Babu. Patriotism is about the heart. But when the heart is not doing it, patriotism should be taught. We studied civics. I don't know whether you did.
I did.
Sarah did.
I did.
And our ABCD, none of the above was E always. You remember our PLOE. You know, what is government? What is the role of a citizen? What do you know? What do you do? The current Minister of Education is trying hard to take education back to what should be. But after many years of destruction.
Who destroyed it?
I'm a teacher by profession. I really yearn to see a very vibrant education system. But that education system should not always be said, NRM destroyed it because it found a very good education system. Ladies and gentlemen, NRM is suffering from its own success. The moment the medical success came in, the mortality rate dropped. The more children we have now have to be, even if you build those classrooms, there are other competing demands. You cannot do what Magufuli did in Tanzania here.
As you conclude, Doctor.
As I conclude, I want to come into the point of identity, which President talked about. You asked Sarah, and she diverted us all. She dodged a little.
Really?
The question of identity, which the President said should be discouraged, is very dangerous. Identity goes with, identity today will either be religious identity, will be ethnic identity, and ethnic stereotyping. Such that the behavior of Tango Doi is not seen as Tango Doi, is seen as those Japadol of Tororo, those Tororo people, ethnic stereotyping. It brings about that kind of restless society where one is suspicious about his own shadow and even the shadow of the other who is behind the other. If you see what the president is emphasizing about this loose, people think it is easy talk, this tribal talk which was fermented by the small politicians coming up. And I've heard some other TVs saying the president himself has been promoting identity because of decentralization. Even that decentralization was a good policy. But to now come up to say you cannot...
by the way, a lot of people have copied it. Devolution is actually decentralization.
Yes, they have...
Here, people are now misusing it to the extent that if a Muganda is in Tororo, if you go to Tororo, the multilingual Tororo, you find someone say, why is this Muganda on this, on the admission list of a district quarter in Tororo? I had politicians from Tororo questioning some two names. These are people who have been there, they have grown there, they don't know any other place than Tororo.
Yeah, of course.
But they are in Mwesije, they are in Musoke. So what we are saying, what the president is talking about identity, this country was destroyed. You remember Anyanya, the sloganeer of Anyanya? Everyone from the other side of the north was being seen as Anyanya. People are not seeing the colonial divide of the north to be for the military, the south
administration,
to the administration and the whatever, Rwanda and others, Banchiga, to come and dig in Buganda. That thing has a lot of roots. My father was a colonial chief. He passed on in 2017. He could speak more Luganda than speaking Jap first. To the extent that when we were making, he was about to die, he said, don't put your English.
But even the Bible was in Luganda.
Yes, in Tororo. We have just changed and people are not yet comfortable.
So this indoctrination, because Buganda was used, Buganda were now sub-imperialists. Why wouldn't Luganda be a national language? Why? It is because of how we see it and how it was used.
Okay.
So what I say lastly, the politics of identity is very dangerous. Tribal talk and hate, which politicians want to use in their semantics of winning simple favor, can throw this country back into the doldrum. And I want to say, for record, Uganda is lucky to have President Museveni. Because if you see the conflicts and the conflicting parties and how he has brought all of them to the table. Today Moses Ali is shooting at you, tomorrow he is with you. What does it tell the people of Adjumani? Is that this government loves us. You may think it is only Moses Ali, but the perception the people have out there, because of that drawing him near the table. This person says, we can do this. He says, come and we do it together. What I say with Uganda, we need a leadership, like you say.
Okay.
Leadership at different levels, leadership which belongs to Uganda and values Uganda. We need very good lawyers like Sarah. But those lawyers should not talk to divide people. They should actually mention the mistakes, but with a proactive method of saying, but we can sort it like this to make Uganda better.
Okay, let me bring in Professor because...
No, but we must thank Sarah.
That is very good.
Because she already is integrating by husband and wife.
Let me bring in Professor Sarah finally here. Professor, looking at these 8 integral parts, the ingredients that the President spoke about, especially the one where...
The children are Ugandans.
Let's come back, ladies and gentlemen. The one of political identity. How do we navigate this and how do we get a Ugandan identity?
Thank you very much. One, as I think it was Captain Babu who said, these, when he was amplifying my point on internal contradictions, these tribes are there with us, the religious differences are there with us, and you're not going to wish them away. You're not going to get everyone speak one language and therefore forget that they are Baganda, they are Banyankole, they are Japadola. So, and he then talked about how navigating this and building the cement around this requires leadership, requires management. To that, I would want to re-emphasize what I said earlier. It has to be cultivated on a daily. It cannot be left to chance that maybe then Ugandans will think and then they will feel. That is not how nationalist projects are built. They are built with a concerted effort, and one of the things I think we could focus on are memory projects. What are the memories we want to remember? If a particular memory was bad and we want to discourage people from going back to a bad historical past, what do we want to do? What kind of monuments do we build? Like Rwanda. For example, we had monuments in Ruwero about how bad a civil conflict can be. Where are they? How many times do we encourage our children in our curricula to pass via Ruwero and see actually how bad a civil war can be? Where are the monuments we have around how bad colonialism can be? So we need to have memory projects. We need to cultivate a particular kind of heritage for these people. We need to have a history of things. It's not just sitting here and saying peasantry was better, but beyond peasantry, what else was there? What was the history of things? Whether you're talking about the health, whether you're talking about the politics, whether you're talking about regimes, whether you're talking about that. So we need to cultivate these things daily, but we also need to do things that make children belong to Uganda, or that grow up as Ugandans. Whether it's singing the national anthem, whether it is galvanizing support around particular national projects, like we've brought AFCON to this country. Is it AFCON?
Yes.
The one that is coming. How do we exploit this for national building so that all Ugandans feel AFCON is here? Do we have every MOP going to sponsor an AFCON match in their area? And within that, what is the messaging that's going? So national building cannot be left to one person in the name of the president, when the rest of us are complaining about tribe and about what's not working. It has to be everybody's thing. So going back to this is, well, one, we destroyed our museum, but I think we need to think of putting back these things. In short, History is very important. If you don't know where you're coming from, you'll not know where you're going.
Okay.
So let us rebuild the museums, let us rebuild the national character, let us rebuild the ingredients of a national identity as Ugandans. And this goes with all the paraphernalia of the state, whether they're talking about flags, whether they're talking about slogans, whether they're talking about all those things that happened in the past to build a Uganda. We need to go back.
In fact, Nyangweso, you are the best Ugandan we have here.
Yes.
And me.
Why the two of you?
The sportsman.
There's a reason.
Why?
He comes from a mixture of Ugandans.
Yes. My family is a
He
mixture.
comes, she's now doing that.
Yes.
So, and these young people now are beginning to intermarry in Uganda. And that they are giving offsprings who are true Ugandans.
Okay, let me get some feedback here. Regards to Dr. Tanga and Dr. Sarah, the journey is strategic and well thought through. However, the van will stop wastage of little resources that are emphasized here. The van discriminates among the workers and minimizes it. James from Manafa there. We need to appreciate the fact that our nation building trajectory has been negative due to the series of military coups and neo-colonialism. I believe the socio-economic development and national unity, patriotism, Pan-Africanism, the GDP, all these will happen in the next 20 years, okay? Ambrose from Amorata. I appreciate all the panelists and the good views, but in a special way, I cannot leave out to appreciate Captain Babu, the educative, truthful, and motivating views he always shares. This is Haruna from Fort Portal. Finally, from 1962 to 1980, despite the political instability, any employed person could manage to take care of their children using their salary. Today, one has to steal from their employers and to get money and educate their children. What went wrong? The quality of education is one of those that needs to be better. We need to overhaul the curriculum by those who went through it. Innocent from Bushenyi. We'll leave it at that, but we'll end with this quote, and I'll end with this quote today. Finally, I want to say thank you to Professor Sarah, Dr. Tango Doi, thank you for coming through. Dr. Sarah, thank you. Captain Francis Babu. We'll end with this quote: humility is royalty without a crown. Good morning.
Thank you.